Why do any of us start making things on the internet in the first place? It stems from this desire to create in the first place. But then the question comes, who are we creating for?
If you decide to create for your younger self, you can really lock in with that material and you can really understand who that person is that you're creating for. And inevitably, there's going to be a lot of people who resonate with the 16-year-old version of yourself. That's where I come from. I come from a standpoint of like, I create for the younger version of Ty.
Dude, I'm so impressed at your setup, man. It's looking super professional. It's looking dope.
Dude, I mean, I appreciate that. I set this up in like 10 minutes, man. Like the key is like just the light, bro. The key is the light.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like if I don't know what light you're using right now.
Yeah.
Do you have like a dedicated light for this stuff?
No, honestly, with the Nomadic mic, as the name suggests, we move around quite a bit. So like we just did, so basically in short, no, we don't have like a dedicated light, and I've just got like my home studio thing set up right now. Similar to you, I guess. You're at home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of YouTubers, podcasters do that thing where there's like a light in the background, in the distance, and it just changes the whole look, man.
Yeah, well, it gives it perspective, and like it adds depth to the shot. And like honestly, like this kind of content creation is all new to me, so I'm kind of learning it on the fly. And like as you said, like just these little details make a really big difference. 100%. The biggest difference is this like massive light that I have right here. I can show you. It's like it's a really big light just kind of in my face. But I mean, video is just cameras just take in light, right? So if you can give the camera more light to work with, you can get a higher quality image. And it took me kind of a long time to realize that for some reason. But yeah, that's the key. And then I also have a light up here that kind of fills in my hair a bit to kind of separate me from the background even more. Yeah. There's just little tricks that you learn, and yeah.
Dude, I'm guessing that you picked up a lot of these from watching like YouTube tutorials and just being really, just paying a lot of attention to how people are creating, you know? I mean, I'm so excited to dive in. First of all, thank you for coming on to the Nomadic mic. I think it's so cool how we just got connected like 2 weeks ago. And here we are, two guys who've never met each other just on the internet, you know?
Absolutely.
I love the internet for that reason. But yeah, welcome to the Nomadic mic, and I'm super excited to speak to you about your content creation journey thus far. And I'm really hoping that whoever tunes into this episode gets to learn a thing or two about not just you, but also how you've been able to grow so quickly. You started your content creation journey back in October, is that right?
That is correct. Yes. So I've seen rapid growth, to say the least, in the last couple months. Really started on January 1st. Really cool that it started on January 1st, actually, just because that's quite symbolic of a new year. Yeah, just one of my videos just conveniently happened to ride a massive wave that took over social media, and I didn't miss a beat in regards to capitalizing on it. And I kind of built a little empire off of that wave that I caught. And here I am at 185K, which is, I'm really happy with that. And I've actually seen some slowdown in growth lately that me and a few other creators have noticed. So, I mean, we can get into that a bit. But I think there's a lot of changes happening with Instagram right now. And just the creator economy as a whole and the consumer economy, like in regards to social media, it's a very interesting, oh man, it's so interesting. Like our whole lives are basically online now. So it's like, It's a crazy game we're playing. We're playing the game of real life, but it's all online now. So it's like, it's weird.
It truly is insane because, like, I've never met you in the flesh. I've only seen the digital version of you. And for all I know, you could be like some sort of an AI that just exists out there. You know what I mean? Like, this interaction is so real, but it's digital at the same. It exists on the digital plane, but it's so real at the same time.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, when you put it like that, it's quite weird. Like, I've never interacted with you as a human being. I've interacted with like your pixels. I've interacted with your audio waves. like, like, yeah. Man, I don't even.
And
I don't. That's crazy.
That's exactly how I suppose every one of your followers, or most of them at least, are interacting with you as well, you know? And a big reason as to why I reached out to you specifically isn't just because, okay, here's a random guy that I found on Instagram, but it's also because what you put out, the content that you put out, had an impact on my life in that moment in time. And I recognize that, you know, I recognize that, okay, what this guy put out made me feel better about my day. It raised interest in whatever was happening on this platform, because, you know, you sift through a lot of crap content on the internet, right? And I suppose if you're a creator, it is kind of your responsibility, if you choose for it to be, to put out content that kind of improves the total pool of what's available out there for other people to consume. I know you're really big into motivational content, educational content. Where does that come from? Because I know this content creation journey is new for you. Where does that come from, though?
That's a I think it comes from, well, I've always, I guess, innately had a want to share things with people. Like many people do. I think there's a certain subset of people that do and a certain subset of people that don't. But I just always felt like the need to share things with people. And for quite a while, like majority of my life, I've been surrounded with people that I could share things with. And I had no problem with that. And I loved doing that. And I consistently did that. And I feel like I added a lot of value to the real people in my life, like the actual people in my life. But then of late, I kind of, through circumstance and trial and error, I found myself kind of pulling back from a lot of my real life friendships, which created this kind of artificial gap that I noticed. My innate desire to share things with people wasn't being fulfilled anymore because I didn't have an abundance of peers or family to share things with. So I kind of naturally leveraged that gap into social media. So I kind of transferred my desire to share things with people in the real world to the digital world. And I did that through creating this kind of artificial gap by kind of retracting from my real life peers for a bit, all in a healthy way, I think. Like I'm maturing. I'm 24 years old. I'm kind of getting into the age where it's like, you know, you're leaving that junior kind of young ship into, you're stepping into the real world, I think, you know, in that age group of 24 and on. And I kind of leveraged that. I think I utilized it maturely and properly to speak to a larger audience. I essentially scaled what I was doing in real life. Like I scaled my desire to share things with people.
Absolutely. You know, I think you put that really well, and in a way that relates to me as well, because why do any of us start making things on the internet in the first place? Usually it stems from this desire to create in the first place. But then the question comes, who are we creating for? And I feel like even people who, let's say, have been on this content creation journey for a long time, they struggle with that question from time to time, like, who am I actually creating for? And I don't think scaling comes as naturally to everybody as it has for you in the last couple of months, you know, whether you call it luck or whether you call it intentional content creation. One thing I find that people struggle with, possibly is figuring out exactly who they are creating for, you know. And I don't know if you've identified somewhere on this journey, like a tactic or some sort of a way to help people figure out, okay, I'm making this for this type of a person, like, you know, a persona per se, or your friends or whoever it may be. You know, have
Yeah,
you identified?
I have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Cool.
have a good answer to that. I didn't come up with this answer on my own, but I really aligned with it. A creator by the name of Tom Nosk, who I followed from the very beginning, he has been very instrumental in getting my head on straight in regards to how I want to navigate this content creation journey.
Mm-hmm.
And he put out a post about who he creates for.
Mm-hmm.
And he creates for the younger version of himself. So the younger version of himself. So he kind of put himself in the younger version of himself, and he creates what he wished he had access to as a 16-year-old, let's say. And I really resonate with that because you're the only person, like, you know you fairly well, like better than anyone else, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So if you decide to create for your younger self, you can really lock in with that material and you can really understand who that person is that you're creating for. And inevitably, there's going to be a lot of people who resonate with the 16-year-old version of yourself. There's going to be a lot of people actually like that resonate with that. And that's where I come from. I come from a standpoint of like, I create for the younger version of Ty. Like, what would the immature version of Ty want to hear at this point in time? And I kind of just give advice to my immature self. Like, I kind of just speak backwards in time. And it resonates with a lot of people because it's coming from like a genuine place, and like, there's no bias or anything like that. Like, because imagine yourself, you're speaking to your younger self. You would be as transparent and open-hearted and open-armed as possible with that younger version of yourself, because you want nothing but the best for yourself. So that's where my content comes from, and it resonates with a lot of people, and it's authentic. People recognize the authenticity of it because it is authentic. I'm not bullshitting anything. I'm just speaking to younger Ty, and I happen to be capturing that voice and broadcasting it. But that's ultimately what's happening. That's I love that you asked that question because it helps me think on my feet about it, and that's exactly why I create.
I think that's really cool because people who aren't creating content, I feel like that would be a good strategy for them as well, right? To speak to their younger selves. And it's so funny that you bring that up because that is literally the last question we ask on the Nomadic mic. I'll say it to you now so you have time to think about it. If there is a conversation you could have with the younger version of yourself and the older version of yourself, what question would that be? Like, what kind of conversation would that be? So I'll let that marinate in your head for however long until we get there. But I think that's also really interesting because a lot of us aren't talking to our younger selves, are we? You know? And oftentimes I feel like we do begin that narrative and that discourse with our younger selves through content that other people create. Because naturally, I find that the conversations that you would have with the younger version of yourself, more often than not, are the same conversations that somebody else would have with the younger version of themselves. Because it does seem like to me that a lot of us go through the same things in life, which is why content and the internet is so relatable in the first place. You know?
Yeah.
And that's why people who have never actually met in person can relate at a level that makes it feel like we've known each other forever. It's because we're all just going through the same things.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. Yeah, I do feel that. I guess that kind of relates to. I have a very analytical, scientific outlook on life, and I don't like to not know why things happen, and that's been a very big driving factor for the inherent hunger that I have for learning. I don't sit, it doesn't sit right with me if I don't know why something's happening. So I always try to find an answer to that. And science happens to be the answer that science holds the answer a lot of the times, in my opinion. Um, and I think, like you were mentioning, all humans kind of live similar lives to an extent, because I think, like, at the end of the day, we're humans. Like, we're a species of animal. Like, we're mammals. We're all humans, and biologically we work and interact with the world in a similar way. Like, I'm a firm believer that our biology and internal processes dictate a lot of our external output, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, to your point, like, I think we can all relate to certain feelings and emotions and situations because we're all human, and biologically we react and have similar responses based on our biology, and that very much intrigues me, honestly.
No, totally. We definitely relate on that level. Have you read *Sapiens* by any chance? *Sapiens* was
No,
my favorite book. No,
no,
dude,
I've heard
put
of
it
it,
on
but
put it on your list right now, my friend.
okay, I actually
It's *Sapiens* is such an incredible read. It was my favorite book back in 2017, and the reason it was my favorite book is because it charts the development of mankind in such a concise manner that it gives you that holistic picture of how we as a global species have developed and influenced each other over time. And it's so interesting to have that literature as context to whatever is happening in the world right now, especially if you're a person who's contributing to it. And if you're a person that's aware that, okay, me creating this thing and launching it up on the internet actually does have a greater impact on the overall narrative that's being played out in the world right now, you know? And that's another thing that I find with creators is this massive imposter syndrome where it's like, is what I'm creating actually driving anything in the first place? Am I creating something of value, or am I just creating for this vast cesspool of basically bullshit content that no one is going to watch, care about in the next 5 minutes after I post it, And then it becomes a thing of I'm doing this for the likes, or it might seem that way. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And I feel like for many people, it becomes this issue with why they're doing anything in the first place, And it always comes back to the self ultimately that impacts their output, which is where this idea of confidence comes into play. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not a confident person. It just means that in that moment in time, you might not be a confident creator because you don't have your why. And of course, like, I mean, I'll let you take it from there, because I feel like you might have a thing or two to contribute about how to build confidence in the realm of content creation.
Yeah. Well, to tagline off of the last statement that you said, like, having a strong why is absolutely a must, because the alternative to that is what you were mentioning before. You're kind of just throwing content into the abyss with hopes of attracting likes or follows for under no unified message or anything like that. So having a why is absolutely important. And, I've been speaking to a lot of people and a lot of my friends and describing content, how I see it, as just an extension of myself. As we were talking briefly in the beginning of this podcast, the digital world and the physical world are ever intertwining, and it's becoming harder and harder to distinguish each other. And I think you would be at an advantage if you can harness your real world self and just kind of amplify it through the digital. And, I can't help someone find their why in life necessarily. That's a hard topic and task to ask of anyone. But I think once someone finds that, I would suggest you harness it and amplify that through the social media platforms in order to stay authentic. And I think, the landscape of social media is leaning towards that towards that concept more and more in 2023 and beyond, more so than in the past. Like social media as we've known it from say 2016 to 2021, those were not amplifications of authenticity. Those were facades. Those were the digital world and the real world were still very separate, and your digital persona did not have to match your real world persona at all. And that's a common notion for the most part, right? Like, the saying like, oh, social media is fake, there is validity to that, because prior social media was all fake, just because the landscape was conducive to that for the most part. I don't mean everything is fake, but I think the overwhelming consensus was that things on social media weren't how they seemed in real life. But I think there's a shift happening now where everything is kind of intermingling, as I said, and the content that wins in 2023 and beyond is authenticity and amplifications of a human self. And I use human intentionally there because of all the AI nonsense that's going on. I think and that's kind of a contributing factor to this whole authenticity thing. It's consumers are going to be looking for human creators who stand for truth and authenticity, and who are just amplifying who they are in real life. That is, I think, what's going to happen moving forward.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's really well put. How would you advise anybody to amplify themselves onto the digital realm, right?
Right.
Because I don't think people wake up every day, or the average Joe wakes up every day, looks in the mirror, and breaks down who they are, and translates that into something that they can then put out into the internet.
Right. Yeah. I think it's actually it's a lot less complicated than what you just said. So, for example, Perfect. So about maybe 2 weeks ago, I put out a piece. I'll tell you the story around that. So I was about to go to the gym, and because I live alone now, I was pretty hyped to go to the gym, and I was like, how do I kind of wanted to share this feeling of excitement that I have to go to the gym right now. So I was like, okay, I have a camera and I have a microphone. Let me just turn the camera on. I'm going to grab my microphone. I stood outside on my balcony and I hit record, and I was like, all right, let me harness what I was feeling in that moment and just get out a message. So I ended up saying something along the lines of, here's your daily reminder to go to the gym. The gym is extremely important for you, and if you want to maintain good health, go to the gym, and it'll help you pursue your dreams. Simple tagline, I was just feeling that in the moment. I got behind the camera, and it was just an extension of myself. I wanted to say that to someone in person, but I didn't have anyone to say it to, so I decided to say it behind camera. And, I brought it into a video editor, chopped it up for 10 minutes, and posted it. And that did really well, and I got a lot of DMs and messages from people saying, hey, man, that was really authentic. People were kind of confused. They were like, I don't know what it is about this video, but I felt like you were talking to me. And that's what I was going for. And I think that's what I've been going for quite a bit in my recent post, is they're just authentic conversations with people like that, because they're just extensions of me. It's I'm feeling like I want to talk about this topic. I'm just going to hop on the camera and say what I think about it. And totally. Yeah. So I think it's a lot less complicated than you may think, and that everyone may think. I think people have a lot of cloudy notions about what content creation is. Meanwhile, it's literally just take your phone and speak some value into the world, whatever it is. That's it. Just do that, and simple as that.
There we go. I'm going to play the devil's advocate just for a bit, because I think a bit of mental sparring is definitely valuable. So, there's only so far you can go. I totally admire and admit that, grabbing the camera and kind of just speaking whatever you're thinking or feeling in that moment is genuinely an authentic extension of yourself. But oftentimes what happens is a lot of us are thinking and feeling the same things week after week, right? So you might have the desire to go to the gym again tomorrow, right? And you could pick up the camera and you could hit record and say the same thing, right? But then I'm sure that would come in the way, like what would come in the way is the thought that, oh, I'm just creating the same content over and over again. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is diversifying exactly what it is that they're putting out into the world, as opposed to putting out the same things over and over again. But then again, putting out the same things over and over again is also a good thing, because then that makes you, that kind of puts you in a niche, and people identify you for, okay, Ty really likes putting out motivational workout content, right? And that becomes one of your content pillars. But I suppose a lot of people don't want to sound like broken records, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great rebuttal to that. And I would lean back on treating it as if this is real life, right? So in a real life interaction, would you go to your friend and tell them the same exact thing every single day? Probably not. You would probably change it up. And you would probably, like, if let's say you were trying to convince your friend in real life, let's say you're trying to convince your roommate every single day to go to the gym, you would likely switch up your tactics if it wasn't working for him, or maybe it was working. Like, maybe you were getting positive feedback. You would be switching up your tactics. So one day you might talk about the cognitive benefits that cardio has, all in the hopes of getting him to the gym. Then you might talk about, the muscular benefits that strength training has. Just like I would suggest you treat it as a conversation that you would want to have with someone in real life. And that's kind of how I guide my content. It's like I have I have a circle of friends in real life, and I use them as kind of anchor points. Like, if I was to go and run and tell my real life friends, would they appreciate hearing this? And that's actually, I use like the real people in my life as anchor points to kind of ground what I'm saying to the rest of the world. Because I speak to a lot of people at once. I don't actually think I'm speaking to 185,000 people. I in my head, I speak to maybe like 20 or 30 people that I know, like, their opinions and kind of where they stand. And those people help me form what I create. So that would be my suggestion to someone in regards to making content an extension of themselves. Like, how would you treat this content as if, like, pretend you're not even making content. Pretend the camera is like someone real, because ultimately that's where this is going, right? It's like, like the camera is just, it is real people. It's like, it's real people, and it's a singular person, right? You look at your phone as a single person. There aren't three heads on you. Like, you are one person. So I speak to like one person, and you're right. I wouldn't go out on that balcony and tell people to go to I wouldn't do the same exact shtick again. I would change it up the same direction that I would if I was trying to convince my roommate to go to the gym.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like that really does make the case for anyone and everyone to start making content, right? Because it does force you to think about, how am I going to say the same thing in a different way? And that in itself is a creative exercise that really does push you. Like, because like the other day, for example, I saw you come out with like some cooking content, right? Like chopping the pineapple, and that was just a test, and I appreciated that. I appreciated how you practiced in public, and I feel like that is a big part of the game. It's just practicing in public, building something in public, and just being okay if it doesn't work out, because it's just a test. And that it goes to say that content creation is really just a practice of getting comfortable doing things in front of other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, if you want to even break that down further, it's being comfortable with yourself. Like, it's confidence at its finest, right? When you're confident in your own skin, you can be confident around other people. And I think, like, that is the root of all existence. It's like, we're speaking as if the digital world and the physical world are different. But it's not. It's the same thing. It's like, if you're confident enough to speak in front of 10 people, you can do that in front of a camera. Like, it's all the same thing. And the only way, I guess we can go down this rabbit hole, but the only way to get better at creating content, or I guess more broadly, the only way to get better at becoming more confident is through practice. That's the only way. You have to just practice. It's through repetition, muscle memory, and also analyzing your losses, right? Like you have to understand where you fail and then you learn from them. So that applies to content and it applies to confidence. Like that's how you become confident. You stack wins and you stack your losses, and you learn from your losses and you learn from your wins.
Yeah, it really is about just not overthinking things, right? I find that ironically, a lot of content creators are actually introverts to begin with, you know. And I mean, I feel like I started off as an extrovert, but I'm slowly entering this phase of my life where I'm becoming a lot more introverted. Like I'm just happy by myself, and I feel like that almost informs the way that I create content as well. But I wonder if that also speaks to an emerging trend of people becoming more comfortable behind digital devices and interacting with other human beings this way, as opposed to seeing them in real life. You know what I mean? And that's just something I've noticed about a lot of my friends who create content. More often than not, they're actually not extroverts in real life. Like, do you consider yourself an extrovert, or are you more of an introverted person?
You know, I feel like I'm morally against boxing myself into labels.
Beautiful.
Um,
Good.
like yeah, like when you initially asked that, like I don't resonate with either because I just kind of live my life the way that I want to live it. And I'm not trying to be like
Beautiful.
snarky at that question. It's just like I have tendencies of both, and I think to label myself one or the other kind of mentally reinforces that, and it would justify certain behaviors of mine that, like, you know, if I label myself as an introvert, I would be justifying to myself not hanging out with friends. Whereas if I didn't label
Yeah.
myself as anything, there would be no justification. Like, you know, yeah. Yeah, I don't like
Yeah.
labeling myself as things. Like, you know, there's a lot of labels that we have in life. You know, night owl, early bird. Like, you know, like, just live. Like, you don't need to
Just
label
live.
yourself.
Yeah.
Like, when you label yourself, you reinforce any negative connotations that are associated with that label, and you box yourself in. Yeah, and I don't like labeling myself necessarily. Um, yeah, I think they're just too oversimplified. Like,
Yeah, I agree. And I am probably going to let that marinate in my own head because I think that's so true. Language does govern our lives.
yeah.
And your use of language is not only your outlook on the world, but a reinforced outlook on the world, right? Because everything that you say is just you reinforcing what you already believe or what you think you believe, right? And a lot of the words that we say do go unchecked. And I mean, I know you're new to the nomadic mic and stuff, but I'm seeing patterns with conversations that are coming up with previous guests. And this goes back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast as well, that a lot of the experiences that we have in life are shared experiences, and which is why content is also so valuable because it does have a direct impact on how a person is going to think from that moment onwards. You know, like this moment onwards in my life, I am definitely going to think like, hey, do I actually need that label? No, I don't. You know, and it's such a simple little idea that can have this multifold effect on my life and eventually somebody else's life who with whomever that I interact, you know. So content is really really powerful in that sense. um I wanted to ask, so I understand that now, you know, you've really your content has gotten a lot of exposure online. I want to create a situation. Let's say we're back on Christmas Day. It's December 25th, 2022. January 1st rolls around and your content doesn't take off the way that it did. I want you to put yourself in a situation of how you would be feeling in the current day, whether your strategies would change, and whether you think you would have the same motivation as you do right now to continue creating at the rate that you are, at the quality that you are.
Okay. So so I would have seen no growth up until today is like what the circumstances.
Yeah, let's say little to no growth. Well, no growth relative to what you have right now. Yeah.
Well, like, when I first went into making content in October, I had no expectations. And I say that genuinely. Like, okay, well, I knew what to expect in the distance. I had no idea what that distance looked like, but I knew that I knew how marketing worked, and I knew how content creation worked, and I kind of knew how social media worked. I've been a very observant consumer of social media since like 2014 maybe. I have a really good understanding of what the consumer side looks like. So I felt really confident in my ability to try my hand at the creator side of things. And because I was very observant, I saw all of these other creators with, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like lackluster video editing skills. Maybe good storytelling skills, maybe good, whatever the case may have been. But I'm a videographer and I'm a video editor, and I've been so for quite a while. So I always had confidence in my ability to like emulate what I saw successful. And that's what I actually started to do. When I first started out, I was copying things. Like copying trends, copying ideas that were proven to work. So I knew that I would blow up because I would scroll through the feed. It's like, look at a video, it would have really high engagement, and I would take that skeleton, bring it over into my software, input my footage, and post it. And I had confidence. I had 100% confidence that this conceptually works because I've seen it work. So that gave me a lot of confidence, and it allowed me to just practice my execution. It allowed me to not worry so much about, does this conceptually work on human attention spans? I had confidence that it already did work. So for the 2 months that I saw no growth, I had the utmost confidence. I just knew it was a matter of time because like I was literally, and I have a whole stance on copying, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I was literally copying things that worked. Like I think copying is a form of art, and I think all art is copied to an extent, especially social media art. So, if I had no success up until now, that would be okay, because if Joe Schmo down the street can get famous and get recognition for the work that he's doing, obviously I can get recognition at some point if I'm creating very similar stuff. That is, that's the route that I decided to take, and I kind of formulated that on my own, and I can understand where people would poke holes in that idea or not agree with that. There's a lot of depth to the route that I have taken, and I kind of I watered that down. Like I don't want people to think that I just saw things, copied it, and then leached their success. That's not what I did. But conceptually, that is what happened. I would take ideas that were proven to work on the human brain. I would take that, inject my own art into it, and then put it out. And it worked because, in all honesty, my skills were higher than the people that I was copying. And I was producing things that already worked. So it was kind of a match made in heaven, if you think about how, you know what I mean? So I think I would be all right if my stuff didn't catch on yet. I would just look at it as it hasn't caught on yet.
Awesome. I really appreciate your formulaic approach to content creation, because it's not just all like scientific. It has this aspect of understanding behavioral psychology, understanding that things are going to be okay, so it has like this aspect of play into it as well. I can see just by speaking to you how you approach this, and I can see how it would separate you from somebody else who might be taking this very casually. Like, oh, I'm gonna randomly try to make some content, put it out there, and secretly like go to bed like, oh man, I I hope it works out, you know, that kind
Yeah.
of they're completely different approaches. And that's making me realize actually approach to content creation really is everything, isn't it?
Oh,
How you
absolutely.
approach it, like it's a subject. It's a subject to decipher and understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I had a really good train of thought that escaped me, but it's an absolute, like, I appreciate you appreciating my process. Because that it is quite a process. And that, you're right. Like, content creation, you cannot just roll out of bed and become a world renowned content creator. That's not how this happens. And I think maybe because of the explosiveness that happens and the virality that happens, a lot of people have this misconception that anyone can just go viral with luck. That's not true. That is absolutely not true. That is like finding a needle in a haystack. Like, it can happen. You can go viral with doing zero work. However, you're not going to be able to capitalize on any of that. You're not going to be able to capitalize on any of the pros that come with that virality. If I post a really funny cat video out of nowhere and I don't have an account or anything like that, and it gets 50 million views, I'm not going to have the foundation to support those 50 million views, right? It's going viral with a silly cat video and nothing associated to it is it serves no one. It doesn't do anything to anyone. If you're trying to build a content creation, like, quote unquote, empire or brand, you need to have a solid foundation first.
Yeah.
So it's a meticulous. You got to meticulously approach it, and you know, the way that I describe that, it might sound a little daunting. However, as this conversation has been going, digital world and the real world are the same thing now, right? So it's like, how much effort are you willing to put into your life? Like, if you want to make content creation a part of your life, and you want to inject your humanness into the digital world, you have to put in some work, just like you have to do in real life. You know, if you want to get recognized in the real world, you can't just roll out of bed and get recognized. That's not how this works. It's the same thing with online.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, man. Wow. Honestly, I appreciate how this conversation is going. It almost feels like a master class, you know, on the beginnings of content creation, because you know, and I would love to get into this in a deeper way, which I find might be difficult to just do over like by having a conversation. But I'd really like to look at the life cycle of a content creator, and how a content creator goes from somebody who's just starting off like someone new, to then becoming a seasoned content creator, and just how content matures over time. You know, and by content maturing over time, I don't mean like, oh, you've put out content over here, how does that mature over time? No, I mean, how does the individual mature as a person as they continue to put out content, and how does their content mature over time? Not just in its aesthetics and like how it looks and everything, but the actual matter of their content, you know?
Yeah. Let me just inject on that really quick.
Yeah. Sure.
So like, that's awesome. That's great. The way that happens, and I think it's actually quite unique to content creation, is by posting content and then looking at the analytics. And analytics means a lot of things. Like, it doesn't just mean necessarily the numbers. It can be the emotional response you get from people, right? In the DMs, in the comments. Like, you can gauge where people are at with your content like that. Then you look at the numbers too. You look at the shares, you look at the saves, you look at the likes. You look at the people putting it on their stories, right? So if you do that every time you post a piece of content, you will learn a lot about how your content interacts with the human world. Like, you learn, you collect a lot of data points on what works and what doesn't work. And there's absolutely no way to bypass that. You cannot bypass that. That's like a master stonemason telling a young apprentice, like, there's no way to, you can't just snap your fingers and become a master stonemason. Like, obviously you have to lay 1,000,000 bricks before you become a master stonemason, because within those 1,000,000 bricks of laying, you've learned countless lessons that are not replicatable. Like, you can't be taught those lessons. You have to learn through error. And same goes for content creation. You have to lay those 1,000,000 bricks of content and then actively analyze all of your failures and successes within the content. And that is how you grow as a content creator. That is how your content matures. You know, it's all about, it's like you're breeding, like you're breeding the best, like natural selection. Like you're taking ideas and you're blending them together. And then you find the best ideas out of this. And then you take some more ideas and you blend them together. And like what works and doesn't work, like what doesn't work, you leave behind. And what works keeps going up. And that's what content is. And that's my latest piece is like, it's just a combination of what has worked and what hasn't worked. Or it's a combination of what has worked and it is a neglection of what hasn't worked. And that's what, there's no bypassing that.
What's coming up next, man? I feel like the what you just described really speaks to what I have been seeing on your feed for the past month or so. It does feel like a very organic growth of content in terms of your strategy. But is there anything big coming soon? Because how I like to see content, how I've observed content as well, is that people have some big pieces, you know, that they've really spent a lot of time working on, you know, the hallmarks of their Instagram feed. And then you have like the everyday always on content that they're putting out just to stay consistent, just to, you know, keep that discourse open with their audience. So, you know, and Instagram has obviously the amazing feature of pinning your best content to the top, right? Which is, you know, so useful. But what's coming up next for you? Is it another motion media piece with a bit of narrative storytelling in the background, or do you have something else in the works that you're currently toying with?
In all honesty, I'm at a slight crossroads in how I want to take the direction of my brand. I'm torn between, not torn, but this all has happened very quickly for me, and I'm trying to make the most of it as quickly as I can. I think a really big, something that I really want to hit home on is I really want to get into YouTube. I think it's a stronger platform, and I think it's more stable and more, it comes with more benefits. So that's really been on my mind. And that's where I see, basically what's next for me is diversifying. I think I'm very platform centric. The vast majority of my followers are located on Instagram and Instagram alone. I'm spread out on TikTok a little bit, but I really don't like TikTok. So the next season of where I'm heading is towards diversifying. I'd like to get out a newsletter. I'd like to start setting up digital products. I would like to start getting into one-on-one coaching for video editing and self-improvement. So that is top of mind for me. And unfortunately, I feel like I've neglected a bit of the actual content creation. Just in the last few days, I'm like determined to get back on track with that. And I have a lot of free time coming up. It's just like, it's a lot to all happen at once, because it's all happened literally at once. Like it's happened all at once. So I'm trying to handle this as responsibly as I can. And, I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And a lot of the teachings are pointing towards diversifying your outreach, essentially, is not being so platform centric or reliant on a single platform. And this goes back to, I briefly brought it up in the beginning of this podcast. A few creators and I, and probably more, have noticed a very sharp decline in our growth rate. out of the blue for the last 3 days, we've all been in the negative for the most part. And I think that just is a representation of how we are kind of at the whim of the almighty Zuckerberg, or the almighty creator of the platform. And I think it's it's a little bit eye-opening. Like, we're at the whim of the platform holder, right? It's our following could just disappear tomorrow. With the instability of TikTok, say for example, a lot of creators could lose their following soon. Like, it's a possibility, right? With I don't know how it is over there by you, but in North America, there's massive talks about banning TikTok, and people have created their lives on TikTok, right? So it's a lot to handle if you're not diversified. So it's an interesting time. And this goes back to me talking about how Instagram is ever changing right now, and they just, they're introducing a lot of new features, and they're apparently deleting a lot of spam accounts and all this. It's just a lot of movement happening inter-platform. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have an exact example to give you in terms of like what is on the horizon for me. Definitely another motion, like an animation video. I have a few collabs coming up with some creators. And yeah, just trying to, play it smart. That's just trying to be smart with the platform that I've created and diversify. That's on the next horizon for me.
Okay. That's really cool, man. And, I would love to maybe even do a part 2 of this podcast somewhere down the line when you do begin to diversify a little bit, because it'll be interesting to see, because I feel like this podcast episode is almost served as a moment in time when you've just taken off and, you've really entered this world of content creation. You found a little bit of success. You know how you're chartering your ship. And it'll be interesting to see maybe in like several months from now to a year how that naturally evolves, right? Because social media is so dynamic, and we don't know what's going to happen on social media, which platforms are going to die, which ones are going to pop off, how your strategy might change, and how you approach this trend of micro learning, right? Because education is fundamentally changing as well. Like I mentioned to you, we're building the skills for the future platform, which I'd be more than happy to collaborate with you on in the coming future. But really, it's capitalizing on this fundamental shift in education where obviously people's attention spans are much shorter than before. But also, we're identifying that serious value can be delivered in much shorter forms of content, whether that be video, whether that be short articles, whatever that may be. And also the creator economy is such where you don't need 500,000 followers to make a living. You need at most a few hundred loyal people who are invested in what you're doing and what you're coming out with your digital products, with your one-on-one coaching. And it's really an interesting time to be alive and to try in this area.
Absolutely. No better time, obviously. Yeah, man. Like, it's things are changing so fast right now. And I don't think I say that lightly. Like, I'm very cognizant of the whole, like, just because I'm getting older, I feel like things are changing faster. There's like a cliche that, like, the older you get, like, I really do think that things are rapidly changing. And I feel like personally, like I'm in the right age demographic and I'm in the right mindset, mentality, health to capitalize on all of this nonsense that's happening. There's a lot of nonsense, and it's like it's really hard to decipher what's really going on, what's not, and like there's just so much change happening. And this is where people can really stand out. And this is where people can really pave pathways in a direction that hasn't been walked yet. And I think that's kind of what I aim to do. And that's why I'm so passionate and excited about this economy, this ecosystem. It's because it's never been done before, ever. there's never been a time, like, obviously, where we're social, like, there's never been another time where this has happened, obviously, because it's brand new. It's a brand new technology, brand new medium, brand new social network. And being on the forefront of that is extremely intriguing to me. I don't know why. It's just innately. I love being. I've always loved being on top of things and on top of trends, on top of technology, on top of music, on top of. I love being on that forefront because I think that's when things are most interesting, and I think that's being on the forefront of anything is where opportunity lies, right? Like. That's where opportunity lies. Yeah, there is opportunity behind the forefront, but the most lucrative opportunities live on the cutting edge. And that's where I like to live. I like to live my life there, and I feel like that's what I'm doing right now with content creation. So
Awesome, dude. That's awesome. I'm so excited for the clips that are going to come out of this episode.
Yeah, dude, I'm spitting fucking bars, man. Fuck. But that's actually, I love that. I love that it came to that, because what I just said is like really interesting, actually. Like, I like to live on the forefront of everything, and there's a lot of opportunity there. Like, there's, and you know, the people behind get the scraps of the people who are pioneering, right? So.
Exactly. I mean, just like we study history, right? I mean, if you look at it proverbially, like the way that you've just laid out, anybody that's eating the scraps, or you know, the second or the third wave of people to catch up to something, are really the ones who are studying history as opposed to making history. If you can think about it that way as well.
Absolutely. Sure, man. Sure.
Yeah. And if you're the one making history, I mean, there's no better way to be remembered in history, right? I mean, of course, you know, a few generations down the line, everyone's going to be forgotten and this and that. But, you know, the whole point of life is really just to make an impact when you are alive, you know? Like, when I say this to a lot of my family members, like, are you guys not bothered by the fact that we can't trace our genealogy back more than several generations? Like, in my family, like, we have, like, we know who our ancestors were, like, several thousand years ago, which is a blessing. But there's a massive gap in between where we have no idea who is who and what they got up to in their lives. And I am personally offended by that. Like, I want to know who my ancestors are, in the same way that I hope my forefathers, not my forefathers, who are the people who are going to come after me? What are they called?
Descendants?
Yeah, my descendants, exactly. I would hope my descendants are curious about what I got up to in life, and I would hope that I would leave enough in my lifetime for them to actually have a good idea of who I was, you know? And I don't know why, but that is just fundamentally important to me. I think I have this innate human desire to not be forgotten, at least not by my own people. You know?
That's very that's interesting. I don't relate to that, but that's interesting. Like, I don't share that sentiment at all. If anything, I share that sentiment in regards to the people that are alive. I don't want to be forgotten by the people that that are in this life with me. I have personally no connection or desire to. I have no connection to my ancestors. Like, beyond my grandfather, I don't know anything. Just because I don't have a desire to do that, and I guess I don't really have a desire for my kids to know who I am. And there's nothing wrong with your stance at all. I think it's actually quite interesting that you care about that. I think it's interesting that I don't care about that. I'm more concerned about how I'm perceived in this moment in time and the impact that I can have now. And if they forget me, maybe they won't forget the work that I've done, because I've, you know, maybe changed the fabric of the way that things have been done. So that's, I guess, more of, I don't know.
I think that's a really good segue into the question I asked you to ponder early in this episode, which was, if you had to have a conversation today with the younger version of yourself, what would it be? And what's the equivalent conversation that you're hoping to have with the future version of yourself?
I would say that I'm proud of you. That would be the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, keep doing whatever the fuck you're doing. I would just give him words of encouragement. I think I have a really good relationship with my younger self. And I, like, all of my confidence, all of my skills, all of the reason that I'm standing here with you today is because of my younger self. I wouldn't, obviously, I wouldn't be where I am without him. And I've always been proud of myself, I think. You know, I've had my ups, I've had my downs, but I've always had an innate trust in my ability to conquer tasks at hand. And I've always had an innate desire to stand out and do my own thing and pursue my passion and stay happy and live a fulfilled life. So, you know, any advice I would give to him would just be the cherry on top. But if we're speaking, like, you know, if I just had a message for him, I would say keep doing what you're doing because you're on the right path. That's what I would say to him.
Cool.
Yeah. And then to my older self, I guess. What was the question? Like, what would I say to my older self?
What kind of conversation are you hoping to have with your older self?
The same exact conversation. I hope my older self tells me, Ty, in 2023, like, keep fucking doing what you're doing. Don't stop. I actually, yeah, I wish that he would say, like, just, you know, even though you don't know what the hell you're doing, keep doing it because it's going to work out. I think that's what I would appreciate to hear the most. Yeah. And, you know, yeah, maybe that would be different for a lot of people. But I feel like I have a really solid connection with myself because I've always relied on myself. I've never been reliant on, I've tried to not be reliant on other people, or like systems in particular, I guess. Like I was never reliant on external systems. So like I'm proud of myself because I feel like I paved my way fully by myself, like with the help of other people, obviously. But at the end of the day, I stand alone in regards to paving my own path, just like everyone does, right? Like everyone's an individual. You don't walk through life attached to someone else, right? So I'm really happy with where I'm at right now, and I'm proud. So
awesome, dude. Awesome. Yo, Ty, this has been cool, man. Like, thank you so much for joining me on the Nomadic mic. We're taking the show pretty seriously this year, and I think this is our third interview of the year, and it's been so cool speaking to you, man. Like, I appreciate the confidence in yourself, in what you've been put on the earth to do, just your approach to doing it. I think it's infectious. And I do think that this episode is going to serve as massive momentum shifting motivation for a lot of people that listen to it. So this is a good thing.
Thank you, bro. And I'm happy to hop on whenever you want to have me on next. It was a really good conversation on my end too. And I love the questions that you asked, and I'd love the rebuttals and dialogue that you contributed. So I appreciate that for sure. Definitely.